just started. Be patient. All right. I'm going to invite you to consider this. Now, it's either a war or an election or a Supreme Court case. It's a Supreme Court case. That's right. An excellent example that you could use as historical evidence in your Blue Book essay, should you choose the federalism topic. This is a great one, okay, because it brings up a similar question. So let's figure out the situation. That is the state of Maryland. Inside the state of Maryland was a branch of the National Bank. Okay, so two questions for you. What's the National Bank and what's a branch? Yes.
National Bank was where they kept all the money to the government. The branch would be like.
Okay, just answer one question, you show up. Okay, very good. Thank you, Zach. The National Bank is the thing that Hamilton came up with, right? The National Bank. But it wasn't one building. It had several buildings in several locations. You know what each one of those buildings was called? A branch. A branch, right? The branch is all connected to the tree. Get it? Get the metaphor?
Yes.
This was the Maryland branch of the National Bank. So, supposedly, any boat that arrived in the harbor with imports from wherever would have to pay the import tax, the tariff, and that money would be collected and put into the Maryland branch of the National Bank. Everyone understand? New York had their own branch, and Philly had their own branch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Get it? Okay. That means that we have a national institution inside of a state. You understand? Okay. This, back off, ladies, take it. This is Mr. McCullough. He works for the National Bank. He's an employee of the National Bank. Okay? And the state of Maryland says, we have a business inside Maryland. It's a bank. It charges interest, right? Banks loan money. They collect money. They charge interest. That means that this bank makes money, which means we should tax it. The state of Maryland attempted to tax the National Bank. We have a state taxing the federal government. A state taxing the federal government. So Maryland officials showed up one day and they ran into this guy and they said, we would like to see your balance sheet for previous months, weeks, whatever. And if you have made a profit, you owe the state of Maryland money. And this guy said, what are you, crazy? I'm not paying, we're not paying you money. We're the United States government. We don't pay taxes to the state of Maryland. No. Uh-oh. Da, da, da. Okay, what do we do? Once again, we have a state saying A and the federal government saying B. Right? It's another example of federalism. Only this time, it's sort of the other way. We have a state with a policy and the federal government saying, screw you. All right, what do we do?
Ask the Supreme Court.
Very good. We now know where to go. Thank you, previous court case. Now we know who the referee is. We go to the United States Supreme Court. They will answer the question. So the question that the Supreme Court now has to answer is, can states tax the federal government? Can they do that? And it goes to the Supreme Court. Da, da, da. And the court issued this decision. Part 1. Congress can do more than the Constitution says. Let's just think about that part for a second here. Congress can do more than the Constitution says. Who from his grave is saying, yeah, I knew it. Hamilton, eat it, Tommy. You're wrong. I'm right. Tommy, as in TJ, Thomas Jefferson, right? The Supreme Court is basically saying that the federal government can do more than this document says, based on the Elastic Clause, including creation of a national bank. So in essence, the first thing the court did was say, yes, the national bank has the right to exist. Part two, states are less than the feds. In other words, no, Maryland, you cannot tax the national bank. Sorry, you're second. States are under the federal government. This idea is called judicial nationalism. The Supreme Court, judges, sided with the nation. So, for example, later on in this class, we will study Brown v. Board of Education. In 1954, the Supreme Court said all schools must desegregate based on race. No more schools just for white kids and no more schools just for black kids. States in the South said, we're not doing it. Screw you. The Supreme Court then said you have to do it because in this case, way back in the 1800s, we ruled that states are subservient to the federal government, so you have to desegregate. And then when those states said we're still not doing it, that's when the president sent in soldiers. This was a great discussion yesterday at the end of the day, right? Ridley kept asking, like, what if a state doesn't? What's going to happen? Is the United States going to invade Alabama and force them to? And the answer is, that's exactly what's going to happen. The United States is going to invade Alabama and Arkansas and all the other states. Arkansas. Arkansas. What state is this? What state is that? Arkansas. What do you call it? Arkansas? You Frenchie? Yes?
The federal government made a law and all 50 states were like, no.
Then how in the world would the federal government have passed that law when no one wants it?
See, that's the thing. Like,
People from another part of a secret state said this is a great idea?
yes.
Stop it.
Yeah, I live in.
No one lives in Wyoming. Okay,
Yeah, it just sucks.
now what's going to happen is you could write this down, but what's going to happen is I'm going to number you 1 through 6. Your job in the next 5 minutes-ish is to, using Google, remember when I had you have a book? Do I see a single textbook in here?
In my locker.
I do. I see a book. You could use your book. You don't have to. Or your computer, whatever. Find out something about your issue. What was the era of good feelings? What does that mean? Who were the people that ran? From what party, and who was the winner of 2 elections, the 1816 election and the 1820 election? Okay. What was the panic of 1819? Did everyone one day in 1819 wake up, look around and say, "Gay!" And they wrote about it? It was very scary. No. What's the Lancaster Turnpike? What is that? There's this thing called the National Road. Where'd it go? And then something called the Missouri Compromise, right? You need 5 minutes, look it up. I'm not saying you need to do a dissertation on it, just 2 facts about it. Something. Give us something. Okay, ready? So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. 2, 1816 to 1820. Yeah. Hopefully, we'll chat when the big hand's on the 1. Yeah, yours is the Missouri Compromise. Yeah.
Why?
Philadelphia.
What was that?
It's a road.
Real clear.
Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Please excuse the announcement. At this time, we have a UW Eau Claire rep here to meet with any students interested. Thank you.
Constructed in
Google it.
17.
No, but I voted on a state.
Are we done with those?
Those states that voted.
Yeah, it is.
You want us to vote on that?
We're gonna teach each other.
So we have to find all of them, like,
Just give me the winner. Use your rows. I just want the winner. The winning person from the winning party for your.
We'll have to write that down.
Yes, I think I have.
This is the first, like,
Okay, you guys got it. You have to sign, yeah.
Bathroom?
I'm up. Look.
It's quite possible you don't need any more time. And if that's the case, great, let's go.
Every Tuesday, Taco Tuesday.
Are we ready? Maybe we're ready. Okay, fine. All right, we'll wait. One more minute. I will add in my 2 cents, but generally what's going to happen is each row is going to teach the rest of yous this information. And then I'll just throw in a little bit here and there, but generally this is it for today. And then we'll attack 2 documents here. And again, I'm assuming that Lindy is going over the intro to the Colchin slavery article. And as a result, I'm not going to. So make sure he does.
Yeah, we did it yesterday.
Okay. And you're supposed to come up with topics. Like, I'm assuming that Monday you will know Colchin's topics.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. That's all I want. Yeah, what do you do? No, here we go. Okay, here we go. So number 1, era of good feelings. Teach.
After the War of 1812.
Stop. Good. Number 1, after the War of 1812. Keep going.
And everyone just had a really big sense of like national pride and unity. And stuff.
Number 2, great sense of patriotism. The perspective was that the U.S. won the War of 1812. Now, in reality, it's probably not true. However, we did prevent the British from taking us over, so in that way we won. They did leave the forts, in that way we won. They did stop confiscating American boats, in that way we won. Now, of course, from the Canadian perspective, they won, because we failed to capture Canada. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, and the Federalist Party just absolutely died.
Very good. So the end of the Federalist Party, it went away. So the perception is, well, that means we all agree now. Okay. Now, does anyone understand what the term gilded means? Gilded. What does it mean?
Like, shrouded, like, kind of covered.
Very good. It looks shiny. I'm going to present to you the idea, nothing that we have to write down, but just understand this, that the era of good feelings was a lie. It was a lie. It was gilded. It looked like, well, only one political party? That means we all agree. No. We just defeated the British? That means we're the best. It's a lie. There were things that would divide the U.S. Of course. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Should we mention that Monroe was president? too?
That's the next. All right. Row 2. Person, party, winner, 1816 election.
Democratic, Republican.
Mr. Monroe. Democratic Republican.
And he got 183 electoral votes.
Let's see. 17.
89, 1792, 1796, 1800, 1804, 1808, 1812, 1816, 1820.
Could you rattle off President's Party? G-Dub? G-Dub? Party? Unaffiliated. Adams. Adams was a Federalist. T.J. Hooker was a Democratic Republican. Did Jefferson get reelected?
Yes.
Yes, he did. Madison, Madman. He was a Democratic Republican. Was he reelected?
Yes.
Yes, he was. Monroe. He was a Democratic Republican. Do you see a little pattern here? Was he reelected, row 3?
Yes.
Yes, he was. The Democratic Republicans are on a slight winning streak. So dominant are they that the Federalists never win election again at the national level. They're done. Now, that doesn't mean the liberal viewpoint is done. It just means that party is done. Okay. Any questions there?
Wait, who are the two people?
Who cares? Monroe. Yeah, who lost last year's Super Bowl? Who cares? New England won. This is America. We care about winners. Okay. Panic of 1819. Am I right? Did everyone wake up one day like, "Gah!" Oh, whoo?
Yeah.
No. What was it? You with the face. Sure, you have a face.
It was the first major peacetime financial crisis in the United States, and the American economy was quite collapsed.
Very good. It's an economic depression. It's an economic depression. A panic is a depression. Today we call them recessions or depressions, but back then they were called panics. And we're not going to get into what caused it. This is not an economics-based history class. But statistically, 90% of American factories closed. 90%. It's really bad, right? That's bad. And yet, what's the one economic crisis that I assume you all are familiar with? Right, you're all familiar with the Great Depression. At the height of the Great Depression, which was an economic disaster of the 1930s, right? On the worst day of the Great Depression, what do you think the unemployment rate was? The unemployment rate during the Panic of 1819 was 90%. What do you think the unemployment rate was on the worst day of the Great Depression?
50%.
You're going with 50. Okay. How many of you say higher than 50? Higher than 50. We got 1, 2, 3. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Who cares if you're wrong? 4. 4. You 5. 5 of you say more than 50. How about more than 40? Anybody more than 40? On the worst day of the Great Depression, the unemployment rate was around 25%. So why aren't history students studying the worst depression in American history, the Panic of 1819? Yes?
Because there were like less people. then,
Yes.
so-
Okay. 90% of a class of 37 is, I don't know, 33, right? That's a lot, but 25% of 100 million is more than 90% of whatever the population was of the US back then. Not a whole lot. Statistically bad, but pure numbers wise, yeah. We're just not the economic giant that we are today at this time. Okay. Moving on. What was the Lancaster Turnpike?
It was a giant road built between Lancaster, Pennsylvania and Philadelphia.
Okay, can you recall what we talked about yesterday? As far as this is concerned?
American
This-
system.
Yeah, very good. This fits, very good, thank you. This fits the American system, right? It's now starting to pay off. The United States government is collecting money, and we're now building what Catherine said, a big road, right? Apparently with large tires. I think she meant like long road. Now, recall please, or keep in mind, it's not like these were like concrete. These were dirt roads, but mighty fine road, right? Picture it like, you know, in the movie Cars, when Lightning McQueen first builds that road. That's about what it was, right? But they thought, nice, smooth road. Only a few tree stumps that we ran over. You know what I mean? Okay. Okay, National Road.
It was the first major improved highway in the US.
Okay, and where to go? Potomac
Potomac
River.
and the Ohio River to connect them.
Yeah, very good. I mean, the National Road didn't go from like somewhere out east to somewhere else out east. It went all the way to the middle of the country. I have a map here. I'll show you in a second. This was the nation's first freeway. It was called the National Road, right? And think about it. If you want to move out west, great way to get there. Use a road. Crazy, right? Okay. Again, part of the American system. All right, road 7. Yeah. What was the Missouri Compromise?
Congress passed a law that Missouri was a slave state, Maine was a free state, and every other state in Louisiana Purchase located north of the 3630 parallel was free.
Perfect. Okay. I assume they want you to repeat that. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Congress passed a law that Missouri was a slave state, Maine was a free state, and every other state in Louisiana Purchase north of the 3630 parallel was free.
I have a map I'll show you in a minute here. So have no fear. Okay. Just writing down, Missouri joins the nation as a slave state. Maine was not a state. Maine was part of Massachusetts. What they did was they cut Massachusetts basically in half and said Maine. Maine joins as a free state. So we have a slave state and a free state. And then, well, what do we do with the rest of the Louisiana Purchase? Well, basically, no slavery. Okay. I'll show you a map here in just a second. Okay, so let me just show you a few things. This is the National Road, right? It starts in Baltimore, goes all the way to the Mississippi River. The National Road. Okay, if you want to move out west, perfect way to get there. If you are raising cattle and you want to develop them into delicious T-bone steaks, perfect way to get them back to where most of the American population is. Okay, paid for through tariffs. Okay. Interesting. Okay, let's take a look at this map. So, here's the Mississippi River. States east of the Mississippi River, you'll notice, generally have funky shapes. Although, do you notice the shapes of the states? The north and the south lines generally are straight lines. It's just that the east and the west are funky. And that's because they're generally based on rivers. Okay. And then after the Mississippi, generally a 2-year-old could draw them, right? They're square or kind of. And that's because choo-choo trains, right, are the prime. After the Mississippi, choo-choo trains were a thing, and that was the primary form of transportation. So you don't need to base transportation on rivers anymore. You can put trains anywhere. And so anyway, okay, so this is the Louisiana Territory. The United States bought from France. Okay, owned by the federal government while it's territory. Supposedly you can move. Anybody can move. When enough people move into an area, you can declare for statehood and you can join the United States. Okay? The first state to join on the other side of the Mississippi River, the first state was Louisiana. Slave state. Okay? After, the next state was Missouri. It applies as a slave state. It wants to have slavery. And the problem was this. If Missouri joins as a slave state, there will be more slave states than free states. Now, so what's the big deal?
Abolitionists.
Talk it up.
There's abolitionists, they're not happy.
Abolitionists don't like, very good, that's true.
Slave states over power in Congress,
Yeah, why?
because there's more of them, they have more votes.
They have more votes in what legislative body?
Right?
In the Senate. In the Senate, they'll have 2 more senators than non-slave states. So big deal. Who cares?
If there's like an issue between slavery and non-slavery, they have more say.
Okay, so the belief was that if slave states have 2 more senators than non-slave states, that they'll be able to pass laws that are pro-slavery, and non-slave states will not be able to stop it. Okay? Well, oh my God, what do we do? We have more slave states than free states. Oh no! We need a hero. We need someone to solve this problem. Here he comes! Oh! And he floats down from the clouds. Oh! Henry Clay! The guy you met yesterday, the guy that came up with the American system. He's like, I got it. I can solve your problem. Look, it's easy. Just divide Massachusetts in half. Add a new state. Call it Maine. Make it a free state. Tied. Okay, now you're tied. No one's thrilled, but everyone's like, yeah, okay, I can live with it. Okay? But wait, it's not over. So part 1, Missouri joins as a slave state. Part 2, Maine joins as a free state. Part 3, this is the kicker. That right there is the southern border of Missouri. Just keep going. Extend that line all the way to the end of the United States. Keep going all the way. That line right there. Just keep going to the end of the United States, which back then was right here. That's the end of the United States right there. Okay? See it? That's where the U.S. ends, because this is Spain. Okay? Now, that creates this big green glob here. I don't know what that blue thing is. See that big green glob there? All that is the Louisiana Territory minus Missouri and minus everything south of this line. See it? That green glob, no slavery, will be allowed in this chunk of land, which is not a state, it's a territory. You understand? It isn't a state yet. Missouri Compromise was the second time that the federal government said, all right, no slavery allowed in a territory. Does anyone recall the first? It was this chunk of land right here, right? The Northwest Territory. Remember that Congress passed a law saying no slavery would be allowed in that area? Does that ring a bell? I failed as a teacher. Anyway, no slavery allowed in this territory. Okay, so that means that, let's say you move and you, for some god-awful reason, you decide, hey, this looks like a nice place to live. And so enough people move there and say, yeah, we agree. Let's create a state called Iowa. Right? Could you, as Iowans, have Iowa be a slave state?
No.
You can't, right? Because it's part of the territory. No slave owners then moved there. You'd apply for statehood with no slave owners. Who's going to want Iowa to be a slave state? Right? Nobody. Okay. All right. Now, south of that line, south of this line right here, you supposedly could create slave states. Okay. So now look at the difference. No slavery in green glob.
Slavery.
Who wins?
Non-slavery.
Really? You think slavery would win?
Well, they have more, but they have to 3/5.
They do? Yes?
Can't territories, aren't they like not represented?
Okay, okay, very good, right? Territories, they're not represented in Congress, but supposedly you could apply for statehood eventually, right? You move to an area. And so what I'm asking you then is eventually, who wins? And I will warn you, this is a trick question.
Nobody. Everybody.
Sure, that's one of those. Okay, well, how many states could you create in this green glob?
A lot.
How many states could you create in this?
Hard.
I mean, you could just make them smaller.
Exactly! Very good, right? This is why Southerners looked and said, so, right? There's nothing that says this has to be one state. They could create a bunch of little ones. And then they could create Dakota or whatever, right? The size of the land did not dictate how many senators, it's how many states will be created eventually. And the belief was, and in many ways it's true, who would want to live here? Right? Who wants to live there? That's North Dakota. I believe they celebrated their tree last year. Look at that tree, man. Awesome, a tree. Right? The belief was that no one would want to live here, so it's useless land anyway. Whereas this, maybe. Also notice something else. I don't know if you've ever wondered this, but here's the answer. Did you ever wonder why, eventually this will become the state of Oklahoma, right? This thing here. Did you ever why Oklahoma has that little like panhandle?
Kinda.
You ever wonder? Well, now you know. Now you know, because that line, the southern border of the Oklahoma Panhandle, is the same as the southern line of Missouri. So this line carved into this thing that would eventually become, God bless Texas. And so it carved into that line. It was north of that line. So no slavery would be allowed in this chunk of that little rectangle right there. And so Texas said, F that, we don't want it then. Give it to Arkansas or Oklahoma. Okay, the reason Oklahoma has the panhandle was because of the Missouri Compromise. Now you know. Okay, questions? Very good, no notes left. Let's attack the last two documents. This bad boy right here. So you may retrieve your documents. No need to get into your groups. Just stay where you are. You want to take a stretchy? Right, 2 minutes, right? Do some jumping jacks. Get some blood in those legs. 2 minutes. Yep. Does basketball begin Monday? Basketball begin Monday? No, it's 2 weeks.
Are the kids gonna be in this?
I think grades are due Monday, so yes. Is that a good thing?
The kids? Oh, so they're okay. So midterms are today, but everything's due Monday.
Today is midterm. How about that? We're already at midterm. Isn't that crazy?
First semester.
It's so fast. I don't know. I mean, it's usually 9 weeks. Is that about right? So it usually is next week.
That's so weird.
I know, we're already a fourth of the way done with school.
6 months left to school.
Crazy. Crazy. Isn't that crazy?
I mean,
Only 6 more months of this class.
everyone think it's so much shorter. Everyone think it's so much more shorter, but it's like really only a month shorter.
Exactly.
It's like half a month shorter.
Yeah, it's not as,
But that's still a lot more.
but still, it's, plus next year, we don't start until like mid-September, probably.
I heard we start late.
Well, everything has to go perfectly.
They said they'll just work around this.
Yeah.
Which will be people.
I've gone through that before. It's awful. You have to like talk loud and stuff. No, I know. It's not my style.
I don't want you to talk loud.
Okay, we ready? Let's attack document 5 and 6. So, wherever you are sitting, help me out here. So let's start with document 5. What document is document 5? 5. Who's our speaker? It's Thomas Jefferson. Hey, Jefferson. Okay, all we've done so far, those of you who just walked in, is we've identified that document 5 is in fact document 5, and the speaker was Thomas Jefferson. Okay. Who is Thomas Jefferson? Democratic Republican.
Former Secretary of State.
At this point, is he the former Secretary of State? You might be right. Well, I don't think he's president yet. What time is it?
Oh, yeah, I think.
No, the date of
November 1st.
no, the date of the article.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a fair question. I don't know the answer. Okay. What's the issue? That's it, right? In a word, it's federalism. Federalism is the relationship between states and the federal government. Who has authority? Can states nullify federal law? Okay, that's the issue. Document evidence, or another way to say it is, well, what's his point of view? Let's answer the question. Can states nullify? Yes, states can nullify. So if you're just putting a happy face here, or a thumbs up, or a yes, make sure you know what the question is. Right? Otherwise, you're going to be looking at it like happy face. I don't know what to do. Right? In your blue book essay, you're going to be writing in Jefferson's opinion was happy face. And I'm going to look at it like, I don't know what that means.
He was happy.
Okay? Jefferson believes states should have the authority to nullify federal law. Why? 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 It's a federal law, man. States can just ignore federal law? Why? Okay. One argument was, so this is the why part, or the document evidence. Document evidence and why are sort of the same thing, right? It's him giving his opinion. Is that states should be able to nullify unconstitutional laws. No, I say that word. I own that word. That's my word. It's also a letter. If a law is, I'm going to dumb it down for you. If a law be stupid, states should be able to ignore it.
That's a lie.
Please don't write that in your blue book essay.
Yeah, we're great. It's a lot.
Like, remember when in the Columbus essay, when I pleaded with you, I said things like, yeah, Columbus was a bad guy. Don't write that. And you know what a bunch of you did? Columbus was a bad guy. Yeah! It's like the bad guy with the poison in Princess Bride. Yeah! It's the best line in that movie. Yeah! Hit him with the rock! Are you laughing at me? Yeah, you are. You're laughing at me. Yeah, you are. Okay. Middle of the second paragraph. Up 5 lines down, reserving each state to itself the residuary massive right to their own self-government. And that whosoever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthoritative, void, and of no force. Right? If a federal law be dumb, we can ignore it. Because states have the authority over within the border of the state. The state has that authority. if a law be dumb. In this case, the law that be dumb was the Sedition Act. Right? So the historical evidence is the Sedition Act, but wait, there's more than that. What states attempted to nullify the Sedition Act? Kentucky and Virginia. That's the historical evidence. That Kentucky and Virginia did attempt to nullify. Hey, Jack. Do you miss this class so much that you just want more? Yes is the right answer. Yes. Hi, Jack. See you soon. Jack just backed into the wall. I watched it. Okay, so make sure that under historic evidence, you're putting, the Sedition Act, but that Kentucky and Virginia attempted to nullify the Sedition Act. Okay? So that takes us right through all the way to this fella. Examples of synthesis. Examples throughout history where the federal policy was A and states said, we're not doing it, and they felt justified in doing so.
Abortion in Alabama.
Okay, abortion in Alabama, or
Gay rights.
the mileage standards in California. Gay rights, very good, right? Kentucky saying we're not letting gays get married here. The only problem I have so far is that it seems like all we've identified are issues where many of you are going to agree with the federal government, right? I don't know what your opinion is on gay marriage, but I suspect a lot of you think gays should be able to get married. Who are we to say no? And then, so Kentucky's attempt to nullify gays' rights to get married. Whatever your opinion is fine. I don't care. But to those of you who believe gays should be able to get married, and then you're going to use the attempt by the state of Kentucky to nullify that federal policy. The problem is that you don't agree with that. You don't agree with the state's position. Okay, so if you are of the opinion that Jefferson was right and that states should be able to nullify, you need to come up with an example where the federal government said A and a state said B, and you agree with the state. Okay, maybe the California mileage thing is something you agree with. They are out there. There are examples out there of the federal government saying, well, we should do this, and states saying, no, we're not doing that. I'll give you an example, freebie. Right before the American Civil War, the federal government passed a law called the Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act ordered all Northerners, if you see some black person you think that's a runaway slave, you have to apprehend that person. Not personally, but get the cops. Apprehend that person, send them back south, and then they'll determine if that person's really a slave or not. And you know what a bunch of northern states did? We're not doing that. Screw that. Well, they didn't agree with slavery. Okay? So there's an example that you could use. There are others. Right, and I will continue to come up with other examples. Okay, that takes us to document 6. Here we go. Document 6. What document is it?
6.
Speaker.
Hamilton.
Person. Good. Hamilton. Okay. Who be Hamilton? He's a Federalist. Or you could argue is the former Secretary of the Treasury. He did. It is.
So we're looking at different times.
This was before. The issue's the same. Federalism. Happy or sad face? In other words, did he think states should be able to nullify federal law? No. Why? Why? What if the law be stupid? What if the law is a Sedition Act, which limits speech? That's unconstitutional. If Rosa can do it, why can't states? Uh-huh.
People in the state might not all agree on this.
What did Hamilton say? Yes, there it is. Chaos. Chaos would ensue. You'd have states ignoring laws A, B, and C, and then other states ignoring laws D, E, and F. You'd have 50 states eventually with their own cafeteria plate full of, well, these federal laws we go with, but then these federal laws we don't. You'd have to have a cheat sheet, right? You'd have to have your phone out like, all right, now we're in Iowa. What federal laws apply here? Oh, yeah, okay. Those laws don't. Oh, right? Chaos. And if you take it to its logical conclusion, we wouldn't be a nation. I think Katie was the one that said that a couple days ago, right? That you'd cease to be a nation. You'd be 50 independent nations. You'd be United Nations. 50 sort of affiliated entities that kind of meet once in a while for a few things rather than one nation. That's what Hamilton's saying. We're one nation, not 50. One. You go with the Hamilton side synthesis that the segregation one is just perfect, right? Isn't it? Federal government said desegregate. Southern states said no. And the federal government said you cannot refuse. You don't get to dictate your own interpretation of national policy. You gotta go with us. Sorry. And then enforced it. Perfect example of synthesis. Yes, dear. Well, it would sort of be the same, wouldn't it? It would be the Sedition Act and Kentucky and Virginia attempting to nullify it. So I think Jenna's kind of question here is, would you be sort of repeating yourself, right? If you explain the Sedition Act in a paragraph, you don't have to re-explain it in the next paragraph. Just give Hamilton's point of view of the Sedition Act and or the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, right? And then enrich it with synthesis. And remember, you only have to synthesize once, just once. You do, of course. You need to prove and then disprove. That's two pieces of historical evidence, right? So, but you can use a piece of disprove synthesis. You can say Jefferson was right because, after all, look at this example from 100 years later. Or you could say Hamilton was right because look at what happened with segregation. Synthesis can be used as historical evidence. Okay. Good job today. 2 Kias are due today, right? Bonus, yep. Well, no. Remember, I double the score of your Kias. No, I cannot.
Oh, sweet. So I have another.
I'm forbidden.
That's a shame.
I think what we'll probably do next week